Hello, everybody. So, you may be familiar with a couple of my podcast channels, or you may not. I do a video podcast series on YouTube, and I do a audio podcast series that I've actually done for about 2 years now. And I've also blogged for a number of years. And of course, all of that has been associated with metaphysical and spiritual information. And I recognized that when I would read the blogging that I had done, that there was a different way of expressing that was going on within the words. There was information that was conveyed there that wasn't necessarily the way that I would be conveying it all the time. And as I get into the audio podcast series, I began to recognize the same thing going on. And I've been associated with metaphysical information for about 30 years now and channeled sources for almost all that time, actually, pretty much all that time. And I decided about a year ago that I would begin channeling for a small group of friends of mine, individuals that I knew for a long time, that I'd been associated with another channeled source with for quite a number of years, many, many years. And so with this channel, what I want to do is I want to continue that process. And so what I'm doing is I'm gathering questions from various individuals, and my intent is to let myself relax into that altered state, let those other aspects of self come through, and answer those questions from that perspective. So my understanding of my process right now is this. And this is as a result of some of my more recent associations of channeled sources, as well as everything I've done in the past. So I'm familiar that at this time for me, there's a combination that's going on. There is my own higher mind or higher self that is sharing information. There is an individual that is another aspect of consciousness that's associated with another race of beings, I guess I'll call it. They are called the Sasani beings. That is called anima. I became first familiar with this individual when I first decided to begin channeling, and that energy I feel very strongly. And then there is because I've become also familiar that one of the things that anima does is to act as a go-between between my experience and other aspects of consciousness that may want to become part of my experience, this channeling experience. And so there is another aspect of consciousness that is beginning to become part of that mix that I don't have a name for yet, that I may in the future. I have some idea of the association it may have, but I'll let that fill out a little bit more before I talk about those types of things. So it is atypical for me to stop during the process and to identify which source I feel that is coming through. I just continue. Sometimes the individuals that I'm interacting with will notice a different pattern in my speech, a different way that I utilize words, various things like that. Although, because I've done this for so long, I am fairly towards the surface as I do this most of the time anyway. So we'll get started. I'll begin to relax, and then we'll start. It usually doesn't take me too long. And then I'll begin to answer the questions that I've had individuals put forward for us. So we would like to welcome you to this particular expression, this particular interaction. As you've heard from Chuck, this will be a dynamic undertaking. This is a exercise for Chuck in the flexibility of consciousness. And of course, it will affect those of you who participate with us in a very similar way. It will help in your own flexibility of consciousness. Most of you, if you are attracted to these types of experiences, have an awareness that you are the soul, that you are the self, that you are the higher self, the deeper self, the oversoul. You may say all that is. You may say the universe. There are, in that regard, quite a number of terms that are utilized, quote unquote, on your planet when these deeper expressions of self are identified, shall we say. And all of them are just fine. It really just depends on what works for you. But you have some familiarity with that, to whatever degree that is. And so it is within that context that we will then begin to share the information that we will share in regard to the questions that certain individuals have put forward. The first of those questions is, in that regard, quite basic. And we find, even for those who have been involved in this exploration and journey for a while now, it is a question and a concern that lingers many times. Because, of course, you are quite used to experiencing yourself in a particular way. You are quite used to thinking about yourself, believing about yourself in a particular way, and that is that you are your body. You are, as some disciplines will call it, the ego. You are, as others might say, the focused personality, the personality self. And this question is, will I die? And so when we mention this, you may all recognize that this is yet something that many of you are not totally comfortable with. In other words, you're not totally in a place where you believe that when you move beyond this experience, you will simply become aware of another experience. Now, of course, the question is asked from the physical perspective, from the physical experience, correct? It is asked from the ideas and the beliefs that are associated with that particular experience, especially those that haven't been colored as they have been colored in the past decade or so. Believing that you are a singular being, that the experience that you're having, the physical experience that you're having, the environment that you're having, your house, your town, your planet, your solar system, even though you really know little of your solar system experientially, you have films and things of that nature. So particularly your planet and the way that you experience your planet. That, as far as you are concerned, is the real world. It is the foundational idea with which then you compare all things. Now, experience, while you are within this experience of physical reality, is a very helpful thing to help you move into a greater understanding of this question, will I die? And the permutations that you can be thought of or considering as you consider it. Information, of course, is where you will start many times. Sometimes you will start with experiences. Experiences shift you into a place of knowingness, not, of course, always total knowingness, many times just a beginning, meaning a knowingness that there is something else going on than what you were familiar with before. So, in that regard, what they begin to do is they begin to push the boundaries out on what you consider to be real, on what you consider to be possible. In that, typically speaking anyway, you will begin to allow more into your experience. As you allow more into your experience, you begin to loosen up your hold on the idea of who and what you are and on this idea of death. Now, of course, there are many different ideas and concepts out there, religious concepts, concepts associated with various spiritual undertakings and explorations that will tell you that, in fact, of course, there is no such thing as death. And the words are all well and good. The ideas are all well and good. And that's a nice starting point, of course. But to begin to be comfortable in what will occur in that transition, or even while you are still within the seemingly physical experience, to have experiences, to allow expressions into your experience of reality that show you through those experiences that there's much more involved in what's going on with your quote unquote physical life than what you once thought. And this, of course, is the journey that many individuals have taken, right? There are now an increasing number and a large number of individuals around the planet who are allowing more and more of these experiences into their life. So, in this, that in and of itself is helpful, right? Back in the early 1900s, if we use time, and in the 1800s, 1700s, 1600s, and going back, you would not be able to interact with many individuals, maybe nobody in your immediate environment, that could share with you information that they had experiences that were outside of the typical physical experience. Now, this may be different if you were associated with a type of people whose civilization had always hung on to that information. It would be more commonplace for you, but that wasn't most of the experiences on your quote unquote planet historically. Historically, you would not find those experiences. Now, those experiences are readily had. If you go to your internet, you can go on social media of many platforms, and you can experience others sharing the information about the types of experiences that they have had that have helped them to understand that there's more to their existence than what they once thought. This was something you would not be able to do even in the 60s or the 50s or the 70s, the 1970s. And so that in and of itself is helpful because the influences that we have around us by others are very powerful things. There are, of course, as you're probably aware, many methodologies to begin to explore more of whom and what you are. Things like astral projection, things like dream time, lucid dreaming in dream time, forms of deep meditation. You can utilize nature if you would like to, going out there, tying into nature in a very deep way, and allow those experiences and those interactions of that expression of yourself to shift you into different realities of understanding. There are a whole number of ways that you can do this. In that, trusting the deeper aspect of yourself, your imagination, to bring you little promptings, ideas, thoughts, maybe we can call them feeling states that help to direct you, is something that's very nice, something that's helpful. So, in that regard, because in fact, you are the soul, you are consciousness, you are eternal, you are without limitations. You have, from that vantage point, you do, from that vantage point, create many, many, many different experiences. Some of those experiences are quite, we'll use the word constrained in this moment, in their experience, meaning that within the experience, you block out most of your awareness, if not all of your awareness, almost all of your awareness, of who and what you actually are as the soul. In that, it's quite convincing to have an idea like death. The idea of death can only happen within those types of experiences where you have buffered your understanding of yourself to such a powerful way. But within the experience, certainly within this experience, what you can do and what many individuals are doing around you is they are allowing themselves to understand more and more of the actuality of who they are within the experience. And so doing this will help. It will help you to understand much more of the true nature of who and what you are. And of course, there's quite a bit that's been shared in book form, in video form, in audio form by individuals who've had these experiences that can help you to have your own experiences, to move you beyond the idea that when you discontinue this particular experience, your experience of existence is going to end. We'll suggest to you that if you're standing in your kitchen and you look out to whatever other room might be next to your kitchen, and you walk from your kitchen to that other room, you will certainly find yourself in another environment. It will feel different. It will look different, even though you can still look into the kitchen, right? But there wasn't anything difficult about it. You just moved from one area of the house to another area of the house. This is the experience that you will have when you quote unquote die. You will move from one area of consciousness, one expression of consciousness, to another expression of consciousness. And it is as easy as walking from your kitchen to the other room. And in fact, you do this every day of your life. You do it in a way that you're quite familiar with, which is what you call sleep. When you sleep, what happens is that you leave a small portion of yourself here within this experience. We'll just say it in this manner at the time, while the rest of you goes back to who you already are, right? Because you leave, shall we say, the largest portion of yourself within the spiritual realm, and it's doing all sorts of things. Just like if you had your little finger in a small cup of water, let's say on a desk, while you were at your computer. You could do, if you were quite especially adept with your other hand, you could do all sorts of things on your computer. People could come into the room. You could talk with those people about whatever. You could make phone calls. You could do many, many things, and your finger would still be in that little cup of water. So regardless of what that small part of you is doing in that cup of water, right, you can be doing all these other things. So it's very similar to that, right? As the physical you is having its experience in its cup of water here in physical reality, the rest of you is doing many, many, many things, right? You are unlimited in that regard. So when that small part of you chooses, through a variety of ways, to no longer participate in this particular type of an experience, when it has gained all it desires from this experience, it will reawaken, shall we say, to the rest of what it is. And you do that when you sleep each night. You leave a small portion in that little cup and you go back and you understand all of what you're doing. You play in dream time. You make plans about what's going to happen in the next days of your life. You plan meetings. You do all sorts of things. And then you come back. You forget almost all of that unless you become quite adept at exploration in dream time and other places. And you live your quote unquote physical life again. Many times you make those shifts during the day when you're not paying attention. You daydream or your mind wanders, whatever might happen to be. There's much more actual flexibility. This experience of yours is much more dynamic than what you understand it to be. So, no, you do not die. There is, in fact, no such thing as death. There is only a change in experience, which we will suggest to you is quite fluid in nature, has always been quite fluid in nature. It's only your ideas and your belief about your experience here and the way that consciousness expresses itself that makes it seem as if that's not going on. So our next question will utilize a little bit of what we just spoken about. And the next question has to do with different layers that can be utilized during the process of astral projection. So understand that your seemingly physical experience heavily influences the ideas that you have as you explore the deeper nature of who and what you are. In that regard, you have the tendency to separate out various types of exploring of self that really are very similar in their nature. Lucid dreaming, dreamtime exploration, astral exploration, deep states of meditation, and other things are of this nature because, of course, consciousness is not segregated in the way that we believe segregation happens from this experience. Consciousness is a flow. Consciousness is a constantly interacting expression, we'll say perhaps of energy, because you have some understanding of that here. And there are no real borders. There are ways of delineating personalities from each other, but the fluidity of the personalities is something that it is very difficult to grasp from your present perspective because you believe, first of all, that your personality is contained within your body, and you see your body as something that is quite stable, quite static, except for the changes that happen in terms of time and age and other things, if you have accents and things of that nature. But the nature of the self is quite fluid. So if you think in terms of consciousness, and maybe we can say flows of consciousness, rivers of consciousness, and just for a number, maybe we can say 100 rivers of consciousness. And these rivers of consciousness are not stratified or bundled, but in fact are more like the weaving of a carpet, where they flow through each other continuously, yet they retain, maybe we'll call it a foundational frequency, yet that frequency constantly varies. But there's a base frequency, maybe we'll call it, that remains. When you do anything in your experience, when you are living your physical life, the idea you have from physical reality is that you have, again, one body. You are in one physical existence, and you see that existence change and shift slowly. But in fact, that is not what's occurring. What's actually occurring is that you are in a new existence in each moment. Now, you're not going to perceive that until you've gotten to the place where you are quite, we will just use the word advanced in your understanding and awareness of self. Before that, you will recognize little of that. And this will expand, of course, as you begin to expand your understanding of self. But your physical reality is not a static reality. It is, in fact, a very flexible and flowing reality. This, of course, then carries over into all other experiences that you have. So when you are in astral projection, the same thing applies. Now, what you will do, of course, is you will, in those experiences, still utilize beliefs. So you will color your experience with those beliefs. They will not be as concrete seeming, meaning that you can shift them much more rapidly than you can shift beliefs within the physical experience. But you will still utilize beliefs. In that, whatever beliefs that you have about astral projection, whatever you will allow as far as your flexibility within that experience will be the type of experience that you have, and your beliefs will play a part in that. The more you relax, the more you allow, the more flexible, the more malleable you will find your experience of astral projection be. Now, even the idea of astral projection is that it happens close to the physical plane, but it does not need to. You can do everything that you can do with lucid dreaming and deep meditative explorations, also with astral projection explorations. There are no limitations in those regards. There are only ideas that there are limitations. That will be up to you, of course. It is quite typical, not wrong, just typical, to rely on the information that is shared by other individuals, especially if they've written something. Now, we're not saying that this is wrong. It's a nice beginning point. But again, you are an unlimited being. You have no boundaries around you. You can utilize those tools to explore in ways that will not even occur to you right now, but may as quote unquote time goes by. So there are many in that regard, yes, layers to the astral plane, because in fact there are no layers. You are creating those layers in the moment, just like you are creating your experience of physical reality in the moment. You create it in association with the ideas of physical reality and the beliefs that are associated with physical reality that you are strongly aligning with in that moment. You do, like I mentioned earlier, less of that as you astral travel, but you're still doing that. So again, the more that you can allow for different types of experiences to come your way within that experience of astral projection, the more you will encounter and the fuller the experience will be for you. Now, at the same time, there is no pace you need to keep as you have that exploration. There is no right way or wrong way to have the exploration. It's just an exploration. It's only you becoming familiar with another aspect of who and what you are. And of course, you are free to do that in any way that feels right for you to do that. Just understand that there are no boundaries to it. Now, we will move into our last question, which will flow from what we've spoken of with this. And we'll add a little bit to what we've just talked about also. Depending on the individual, depending on the experience that you would like to provide for yourself. And in this, we'll talk in terms of the aspect of yourself that still knows itself as unlimited, and that aspect of yourself that maybe has some hints of that, but still largely believes that it is physical, right? Because both are you. The aspect of you that believes that it's still physical is an expression of the other you, in that there's no really distinction to be made. There's no separation in that regard. There's an experience of separation, but there actually is no separation in that regard. So really it's you, regardless of how you want to put it. You from this experience and you from another experience, but it's all you, right? In that regard, you move back and forth into this experience, to that experience, from this experience to that experience, and you carry with you choices and decisions that you're making in that other experience into this experience. And many times when you're back in this experience, you forget that you've made these choices from the other perspective, right? But that's in fact what's going on. It's always a collaboration. You're always making those choices in a collaborative way with this aspect of you, with the rest of you, that understands things in a much broader way than what you recall when you come back into the experience. You don't remember that you've been doing those things. You don't remember that you've been within the spirit realm, within dream time, configuring particular experiences that then, when you re-enter this, and this happens at an unbelievably rapid rate, you never will follow it from this perspective until you are quite well along. You forget that you plan these things. You forget that, yes, this is the kind of experience I want to have for whatever reasons that you have from all of those perspectives together. So in that, when you get deeply into out-of-body exploration, when you get deeply into lucid dreaming, when you get deeply into meditation, sometimes when you come back, or prior to that, you may have the idea or the concept may become quite immediate to you that you may not come back, right? And you do this for a number of reasons. Probably the largest reason why you do this, especially if you decide to come back, is to explore what you still believe about the idea of death, about the idea of identity. Who are you? What is the reality of the nature of who and what you are? Right? It gives you those opportunities. Now, from this perspective, if we talk about near-death experiences, where individuals have some sort of an accident, they are in terms that the individuals around them recognize. In a hospital, maybe, they might be in a coma. Frequently that occurs. Whatever the situation may be, sometimes it's more brief, sometimes it's longer. But from the individual's experience, they come back with an awareness that they have been someplace else, quote unquote. They have been in the spiritual realm in some way, shape, or form. And in this, what they hear, in whatever way it is conveyed to them, is that it is not your time yet to leave. So what we're talking about here is the experience that we just talked about before, a collaborative undertaking. In other words, you are the you that has made the decision that you want to continue to explore physical reality a little bit more. Now, in actuality, there's more to it than that, because there's not just one version of you that's in existence. And this ties into what you may have heard being used in some movies lately, or you may be familiar with it through things like quantum physics, are the concepts of a multiverse. meaning that there are an infinite number of universes, and in that, an infinite number of galaxies. And I want to make it more personal. An infinite number of this universe, an infinite number of this galaxy, an infinite number of this solar system, an infinite number of this Earth, right? Now, of course, they are all different Earths, but there are an infinite number of you on those Earths. Now, those Earths might be different in just a very small way. You may not even recognize it, or larger ways, right? Because all of these different yous are exploring themselves as consciousness, as self, as soul, in different ways. And so, in a near death experience, what's actually occurred, we will suggest to you, is that one version of you died in the way that we term it, right? Discontinued this experience. The experience that you're now having is another you that is almost identical to that you on a planet that's almost identical to that planet, and you're continuing on. And in that, there's a story that's been built through the others around you about how that experience went for you when you were not in attendance of it, whether it was a half an hour that you were gone, whether it was an hour, a day, 2 days, you were in the hospital, whatever it might happen to be. There's many, many, many permutations. I've had these experiences myself in a couple of different ways, where one aspect of me, one probable me, ended its association with physical reality, and another me continued. So this is what's actually going on. Within the experience, though, what you will do is you don't want to, we'll use the term, rock your boat too heavily. And so you will utilize, especially as you come back, it's like the dream experience in typical terms, that when you return to what you consider to be waking reality, the things that went on are shown to you symbolically. So they make some sense within the experience that you're having. This is the same thing when you have what are called near-death experiences, right? You have a remembrance of a message that's been imparted to you where you died, but you're going to come back, right? Where in fact, that's not really what's occurred. There was a probable you that discontinued the experience, and you are now a different you, and you're continuing the experience in a life that to you seems like the life you were always living. And that in and of itself is much more complex than most understand, but we're not going to get into that at this particular moment. So it's the you. You tell yourself that you're not going to stay, that there's an aspect of you, even though that word won't be used, because you consider yourself to be one you, that you're going to go forward. You're going to move forward into your life. You're going to continue your quote unquote physical life. It's you. You tell yourself that, right? You've made the choice from that perspective to keep parts of you within the physical experience, right? And so you will continue within the physical experience then after having whatever experience that you have. And then you will fold into your experience different types of movements from the experience that you had. It really depends on how you want to move forward in your experience of quote unquote physical reality. So again, to briefly answer it, that the individual who tells you that it's your time to come back is just you. But again, there is much more to it. In this first expression of our interaction with all of you, regardless of the questions that you have, regardless of the hesitancy that you may have with exploring them, understand that the answers to all these questions really reside within all of you, because your own has all this information. And in fact, in these interactions, we work collaboratively with that aspect of you because this interaction could not happen otherwise. And we share the information that we share with you through that collaboration. So, in that, we will look forward to our next meeting and hope that your exploration of who and what you are continues to be an exciting exploration for you, and that you can continue to allow those experiences to deepen for you as you move more fully into your understanding of who and what you are. Well, everybody, appreciate your joining us here today, and we will see you with the next time that we do this. Take care.